Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Amputate Fear, Amplify Life podcast, where transformation always takes center stage. I'm your host, John Register, a two-time Olympic trials qualifier, combat veteran, amputee, Paralympic silver medalist, and certified speaking professional. Join me as we dive deep into the lives of senior suite leaders and inspirational influencers who turned adversity into advantages and obstacles into opportunities. We uncover the raw, real stories behind corporate facade. We're talking about challenges, pitfalls, and most importantly, the victorious turnarounds that define true leadership. Prepare to be inspired to act, as these leaders don't just overcome obstacles, they transform them into triumphs. Let's amputate that fear and amplify life right here, right now. Brought to you by Inspired Communications International, where we work with business leaders on how to hurdle adversity, amputate fear, and embrace a new normal mindset to win the medals in their life by delivering interactive keynote speeches, fireside chats, sales kickoffs, end of the year celebrations, and much more. Visit johnregister.com to learn a bit more about what they offer for you all. All right, so let's jump into this. My guest, without any further ado, is absolutely amazing. She is an experienced architect who has been working in the meetings industry, creating dynamic audience experiences for over 20 years. Her vast knowledge of next generation learning and facilitation skills helps design dynamic meetings and guarantee more participation, opportunities for connecting, and peer-to-peer interactions to deliver on the networking promise of in-person events. When something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, and you need a direct line to solve your networking disaster, just call our guest. She will fix it. She is a top choice for delivering professional keynotes and professional business networking on women's leadership, and is the creator of the networthing process. That's interesting. And I'm excited to introduce to all of you the Wonder Woman of networking. I swear she knows everybody. Miss Connexity, I gotta get that word in my mouth. Connexity herself, the one, the only Sarah Mitchell.
You did good on those words.
That's right.
Connexity trips up a lot of people. So good on you.
I was practicing that one. Connexity.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on. And I know for us was last minute, but you're here, and I just had to get you because you're such an amazing human. So the first question I have for you is. And I begin this podcast, it's always the same way with a very simple question that kind of takes us in a lot of directions. You're writing a book entitled The Meeting Professionals Anarchist Guide to How to Destroy Your Next Event. What might be one of your chapter titles?
Oh, the first one that popped in my head is if it's not broken, don't fix it.
If it's not broken, don't fix it. Okay, that sounds interesting. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Just relax and let it flow.
Yeah.
What's the story?
Well, it's so tempting to keep things the way they've been going. You know, there's so many meetings that are doing okay, and I hear this a lot. It's not broken. Why do we want to fix it? And it's about the worst thing you could do right now, because there's never been, post-COVID, this is the time. There's never been a better time to experiment, to tinker, to take risks with meetings, to be able to, first of all, not only grow, but to stay viable, to actually have a chance of being sustainable. You have to change. And so that would be what the chapter would be about. And I think it's, I work with so many meeting planners, and nobody sets out to plan a bad meeting. I mean, this is a ton of work. It's a ton of work, and they're working on it all the time. And everybody wants to plan a kick-ass meeting that attendees are going to love, that sponsors, exhibitors are going to value. I mean, that's why they set out. Everybody wants that. But there's, you have to really have confidence, and you have to have support to be able to take some risks. But without risks, there's no rewards. And that's, I think, what they really struggle with is knowing what risks are worth taking and how to actually gather the data that you need to support some of those changes.
I like what you said, because we do have to push a little bit and take a little bit more risk. And I saw, kind of during the pandemic, maybe we're out, maybe we're not, there's some things that are definitely changing and have changed since the pandemic. But one of the things I've seen is people or planners, speakers even, going back to the same thing they were doing prior to the pandemic and
Yeah.
thinking that's going to solve issues. What's your take on that, and how do we get people, if your answer is to move forward, to actually shift gears and move in a new direction?
Yeah. Basically, if when it comes to, speakers and sessions, and let's take a typical association conference, which is most of our clients, and the concurrent education, right, is 80% of the value proposition of attending that meeting. You might have one keynote a day, but out of the 3-day spread, 80% of the time of the value is coming from these education sessions. And at this point, if it's a talking head in the front of the room, if it could have been done on Zoom, it shouldn't be in a room. If you could reproduce it on Zoom, it shouldn't be in a room. Put that on a t-shirt.
That's good. That's a good line.
Because it's true. People are clamoring back. Attendees are coming back. All of our meetings are, our clients are, their attendance is at, if not exceeded, what it was in 2019. So they're back. They're back and they're here, but they're back with a different hunger, because after living in the virtual world for 3 years, that's not what they want. If that's all you're doing is a talking head, then they're wondering why they made the investment. Why did they leave work? Why did they come? People are starving for that opportunity for peer-to-peer learning, for the context to what the speaker is talking about. So the speaker presenting the content, they need the context of how do I apply what I've learned. And that's only going to come from talking to peers and comparing ideas and getting new perspectives and strategies and learning what somebody in the other part of the world is doing that you haven't even considered in your world. And it's when those connections happen where people go, my God, this was the best networking I've ever been to. This was worth the price of admission. I mean, that's when you hear that stuff. And we used to, before the pandemic, we used to think, well, that randomly happens at lunch or in an elevator, we're going to be happy. We'll just let it randomly happen. And that's no longer an option. It needs to be planned for and baked into the entire design for that to happen.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation that, you're planning for these things and them happening by happenstance in the hallway, in the break room, or breakout session, on the way to the breakout session, the popcorn, the chocolate fountain, all those things that come. But you're right. I love that tag, that if it can be done on Zoom, it shouldn't be done in a breakout room or in your room. That is really good. Well, what about those that kind of shifted in the pandemic and began to look like kind of the opposite way? So they began to bring in other elements and going to making it like almost like a YouTube production or a late night talk show host that would be on, and they would bring in all these fly-ins and things. Is that kind of what you might be talking about with bringing that Zoom experience to the platform and having more interactions like that?
Well, I mean, so in Zoom meetings, what began to happen, if you were ever on one, is the chat, right?
Yeah.
The chat explosion was almost a separate thing that took a life of its own. I don't think people really prepared for it and didn't realize what was going to happen. But what happened was people really got used to, we're listening to a speaker, and I now get to ask my colleagues, what did you think of what they just said? Is that applied to you? Hey, this has been my experience. And they got this context and this interaction and validation happening, right? Why the speaker is speaking. And they're like, I don't want to stop that. why are you putting me in a room now and I got to shut up and listen for an hour and not be able to talk about it? So yeah, what's happening is that we have to bake in that time for interaction. And because if you don't, they're going to be on their phone doing it anyways. They're going to be texting or or on social platforms or whatever. Or I've literally seen people just get up and walk out and they stand in the hallway and have their own, round table. So it's really we have to figure out that community building that happened during virtual conferences that happened during COVID. That connection that people were feeling and the value. I mean, I'll never forget so probably maybe a week after the shutdown, there was some really, really smart people in the meetings industry, event designers pulled together something, and I was invited to get on. And this was in the lockdown early parts, and I remember getting on, and they had a couple really smart people kind of leading it. They had a really, really good chat platform going, and then we had breakout rooms that we went into, and I just remember coming out of that, the feeling I had when I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And everybody's coming together to figure this out. And it takes me, I can tell you exactly what I was wearing, what I was doing, where I was sitting when this happened. And that was early 2020. And it just was overwhelming, like, oh my God, we're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. So I think that kind of connection and it had nothing to do with the speakers, by the way. I can't even tell you who. I mean, I can remember one of them, but it was all about who was in that chat and what we were saying to each other. So I think that's what we got to get to is how do we leverage that connection? How do we use speakers? I think the role of the speaker has changed. So, particularly in the concurrent education landscape, at an association conference, it is, I'm trying to get my clients to call them learning facilitators and no longer use the word speaker, because they should be facilitating the learning and they should be designing with adult education, principles around how people actually learn. Different from a keynote. I mean, a keynote slot is still that really inspiring, engaging speaker that engages everybody with fabulous storytelling and takes people on a journey with their amazing ability to tell stories and weave stories that are relevant. Still has a very, very strong place, but the keynote speaker that no longer has any idea who you are, that they just roll in and deliver the canned speech, there isn't a place for that anymore. My clients don't want to book that. I mean, other than sure, you want to get Michelle Obama and you've got $250,000. Yeah, she's not going to get on a call with you and get to know your attendees. She's going to show up, and that doesn't matter. But that's the level that you have to be at to be okay to just show up and do your thing. Otherwise, it's really, we want you to know the attendee. I mean, there was a really good study that came out. If you haven't seen it, John, I'll send you the link. It just got released last week by Freeman. And it's attendee values, very large research project they did on talking to attendees over the past year who went to in person. What got you to register? What do you value about a meeting? They got very granular on what's important to you about a speaker, what would get you to be in that room. And it was overwhelming in that report that they didn't care about celebrities, that didn't get them to register. I think celebrities, if you're already on site, it does put butts in seats. People will go into the session room because they're kind of curious. But what gets someone to register in a keynoter is not a celebrity. It's, does the speaker really know and understand our pain point? And are they going to actually inform us? And this is what the study said, what they care about is speakers who really are going to inform and give them a new take or new information or new spin on that. I mean, really giving them some, walking away with some valuable information that can be applied and used. So, that was really, really, really relevant speakers.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, what you just said there just kind of anybody's listening to this is going to be like furiously writing that down like I'm writing it down, because that's why we have Sarah Michelle, that is on right now. I wanted to go back just a little bit, and you know, you have the word we talked about a little bit earlier on connexity. Why is this so important to you? How did that come about? And when you're talking about this industry, probably I'm talking about the meeting professionals now, why it's important to really dive into connexity.
Well, connexity is an old Silicon Valley term from the early 1990s when we were rolling out the first, it probably would have been more like 2000, but early 2000, late 1990s when we were rolling out, MySpace and some of the very first social media platforms.
What's that?
What's that, right?
No,
And actually, some of
what's
the
that?
engineers in Silicon Valley started saying, how do we take community, the idea of community, and the idea of connecting, and we put those two words together, and they came up with connexity. It was not a word we invented at Velvet Chainsaw. It was a word they were using when they were designing the early social media sites. How do we get people that want to be part of a community to connect online? And so when I joined Velvet Chainsaw 11 years ago, I didn't want to use networking in my title because I'd, obviously been a keynote speaker in that space for a couple decades. And it's a misunderstood word, right? Networking has a lot of negative connotation to it. It's very misunderstood. And we did not want to put that in my title. And so we came up, somebody on the team was like, let's call you professional connexity, because and this was 11 years ago where the world was very different than it is now. But we knew even 11 years ago that the whole reason why anybody goes to a face-to-face meeting, you can just I've looked at thousands of evaluations with all the client, consulting we've done. And the number one reason is networking. They're all there to network. Second is education. But networking is always number one, doesn't matter what the industry is. And it's the opportunity to network. And yet it's the thing that planners struggle with the most. I mean, they're like, if I have an open bar, don't I get to check the box that I'm doing networking because we have an open bar? Open bars do not equal facilitated networking experiences because people need them facilitated. And, introverts or first timers, they see an opening reception with a bar and they walk in that giant room. They don't know a soul. They turn around and walk out. Your bar isn't going to keep them there. So how do we facilitate those connections, and how do we help people find their tribe and find their like-minded? Because inclusion is, this is also in that Friedman report, which again, you can send out as a link to this or as an attachment, however you want to do it to your feed. But
sure.
But it's, there's a huge amount around that. People are craving community, and they want it facilitated.
When you said that, it reminded me of a gentleman I met last year, 2023, and I'll date it for that reason. His name John Levy, wrote the book, You're Invited. Amazing read, probably one of the best reads last year. And it's talking about this connexity, right? And how do we do this better from, events? So I was invited to a dinner, and the dinner was 12 people. You don't know who anybody is. You cannot use last names, only first names only. You don't know who anybody is until you get there. You create a meal together. So you have different stations. And you sit down, somebody prepares the table, and then you try to guess who the people are around the table. That experience
that sounds amazing.
It was incredible. And so I'm not going to go into the whole thing of who was around the table, but I will say that when I read the book after that, there's different ways to think about how to connect and how to have an experience elongated. So if you have a budget, say about $100,000, and maybe you don't hire that big name celebrity person to put them in the room to put butts in seats, because you can actually spread that $100,000 out maybe by $10,000 and do 10 different smaller events for greater impact. Maybe you can do 100 $1,000 events that will even create it even more of a connection for that. And link them all together. And I thought that was brilliant, kind of dovetailing what you just said, Sarah,
Mhm, mhm.
on that as well. Have you seen anything kind of similar to that in connecting audiences that are going to conferences?
I love that idea, what you just said. You know,
Definitely not mine.
yeah, I mean, the problem with what you just said, when you're talking about, I mean, we're generally working with national associations with, 3 to 5,000 attendees. Is just to scale that is way more than $100,000. But I can tell you that some of the very simple things that are free to do that are coming back into vogue are like dine arounds, where you literally just work with your CVB at the city you're hosting in. They give you the list of restaurants. They reach out to the restaurants for you and make those connections. You reserve tables. And, this is something, John, that, NSA, the CSP CPAE Summit, when I was involved with the early design of that meeting, that's what we came up with was let's put people that don't know each other together. Let's give them a budget or, a set amount to go out to dinner, and we set up the restaurants and to this day, that's still how they do it. And it's still something that everybody talks about as being the highlight. So, I mean, just simply doing dine arounds, getting restaurants in the area to cooperate with you and reserve tables. And, most of my clients, there is no budget for this. They just literally have sign up sheets and attendees sign up when they get on site. And that's it. But I've seen it get to a scale where sponsors sponsor the restaurant and they pay for the tab, and they get to have their representatives sitting at the different tables with attendees and get to be in the room and just get to have those conversations. So it can be completely budgeted and covered in budget, and you buy the dinner just by simply getting sponsors. So though, that kind of idea is really great. And then even something, I'll give you one more that again is costs nothing to do, and it's so simple. I shouldn't say so simple, but it's something that is not hard to do if you get your staff on board. And that is, to simply ask people in the registration process, what's keeping you up at night? What are some of your biggest challenges that you're hoping to find solutions for? You can have a drop-down menu in your registration, and they answer a couple questions. And then from that, you put people together. And so you could have in your opening session table rounds, and it's got a number on it, and on your badge has a number on your badge. You have no idea why the number's there, but you're told to go find this table. When you get there, there's other people you don't know that have the same number on their badge, and you're trying to figure out how did this happen? And you soon figure out, because this happened to me, I was an attendee and I experienced this, and it wasn't until late into the first session when they were having us, and this was the general session room, and this was about 1,200 people, and they were having us talk as a table. We figured out we all put the same problem that we were there to solve together, and that's how we got grouped. And we all came from different walks of the industry, the meetings industry. And to me, it was, to this day, this happened a couple of years ago. It's one of my favorite meetings. It was happened before COVID, so 2019. But that's something, another way that how can you just help people find each other, costs nothing. It's just asking some questions and then coming up with a way for them to find each other on site.
Yeah, I love that idea. That is actually brilliant to do that. And then people, then they may not have ever connected before, right? And so now
yeah.
you're in
I didn't know anybody.
Right.
I didn't know anybody. And then we were encouraged to keep coming back every time we came in the general session room to sit together. Although they didn't babysit it, they didn't monitor it, but we did. We did. And some of those connections I still have today from 19, I keep in touch with because I had a lot of friends there that I could have sat with, but it was the opportunity to get with people that were dealing with the same challenge I was, and from different walks of the industry, that was so fascinating to me. And it would have been people I probably would have not talked to.
Yeah, that's just, it was always great to sit with other people, but to have a way to do that around the theme, that's really strong. You're with Velvet Chainsaw. And the question I have about that is, number one, I want to explain a little bit what it is and what the business case is for it. And then I want you to put it with what's one thing that Velvet Chainsaw or Sarah Michelle, as part of that, wishes the industry. And now when I mean the industry, I'll explain it. It's the supply chain to the end client. Anybody in the supply chain to the end client. So it could be a bureau, it could be like a conference direct, it could be a merits, it could be a professional speaker, anybody in the supply chain to that. So kind of what's Velvet Chainsaw? What do you think, which the industry would understand?
Yeah. So Velvet Chainsaw is a conference improvement firm. Been around for about 15 years. Mr. Velvet Chainsaw is Dave Lutz, well known and loved in the industry and a Hall of Famer. And basically we work primarily with national associations, although we do have a few corporate clients. And our phone rings when there is typically a problem with a high stakes meeting, often an annual meeting. Problem being we're losing attendees, we might be losing sponsor and exhibitors, or we just want to, it's actually working, but let's not wait for it to break. Let's actually reimagine it. Let's modernize it. So that's what we do. We're a team that each has different specialty when it comes to this, and we swoop in and take a very data approach to coming up with solutions for modernizing and reimagining events. So that's what we do. And what I guess to the other part of your question as to what do you wish suppliers working with meeting clients or meeting organizers knew. And I think I'm going to say that we're all in this together, that it is one team. And whether or not you are just a keynoter for an hour or you're the reg, your merits and you're on site to do reg, we're all in this together, and we're all, kind of one team. And so being really willing to go, to go the extra mile, like I'll just take a speaker since that's a lot of people will be listening to this, what can you be doing to help market the conference, not just your session, but the conference, the value of the conference? How can you be adding to the strategy to help attract and retain attendees to it? How can you be literally part of the content strategy? So that might be offering to do, a podcast interview, or, be interviewed for an article to help promote your session. And not nickel and diming, the client for that, but just realizing that your value prop, you're a keynote speaker, you're one of 3 speakers, you're important to the messaging of that conference. And if you can partner along with them and say, what can I do to help you? And, I'm thinking about, for example, some merits or something like that, or conference direct who might be on site. It's not just staying in your lane, but, maybe you're stepping out and, a attendee walks up to you and says, how do I find this? Well, I'm sorry, I just work in reg. I can't help you. That's not what we're looking for.
Not my job.
We're looking for, and by the way, I love merits people.
Yeah,
and I love conference direct people. So I'm not saying they would do this. They would probably be the ones that would be like, come with me. I'm going to walk you to who knows.
Show you.
But it's like that. I mean, some of our clients are starting to bring together. We just had a client just do an all hands, all of the suppliers, every supplier touching their annual meeting flew into Chicago for an all hands 2-day conference, so that each of the vendor suppliers were presenting, hey, this is what we bring to the table, this is what we do, and everybody had a chance to ask questions. And we thought it was amazing, and something we're going to be recommending to other clients to do. And, the association took care of the food and the space, but every vendor flew themselves in and paid their way because they saw the value in everybody coming together as one team.
Yeah, I love that answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we were talking to the amazing Sarah Michelle, and that you've been on this podcast for this long. I know you're probably taking furious, copious notes right now. Last question for you is, what other leader Would you, after hearing this podcast, would you say, "Oh my gosh, they have got to be on"? I mean, I asked that to Sylvia DeGusto. She said, "You." I said, "I'm already calling her." So I got on speed dial.
Um, well, for this particular, I mean, if so specifically about in the meetings industry.
Yeah, the meetings industry, like a CEO leader, a leader that is going to have. They've been around for a little bit. They're kind of well respected. Their opinions matter. Um, they've dug their hands in the dirt, so to speak.
All right. Well, a couple come to mind. Can I think about it and follow up with you?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely,
Okay. All right.
absolutely.
I don't want to name them here.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't want the other
I mean,
ones.
there's several. There's several. So you and I will follow up, and I'll find out. Where would you like more thoughts on what area? Because I can think of. I mean, I can actually think of a couple meeting planners who are really fabulous, and then people who are more, on the production side, which would be really interesting. So will you tell me what you're looking for, and I'll give you names.
Well, so for everybody's out there, what we're really looking for are those that are just in the space, and so we really want. It doesn't necessarily need to be a speaker. I love what you said about production. I think they see more speakers or see events and how events are run than anybody that's out there. I think so. We often overlook them. We don't think they're just doing the back end things. So I think that'd be a fascinating conversation. I wasn't even thinking about that. So thank you for that. What a gift. And how do we find you? How do folks that are listening find you, find Velvet Chainsaw, and get in contact with you?
Really easy. velvetchainsaw.com is our website, and you can find me on the website.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I took away a lot of notes. I know you all did too. We must fix, tinker, and change it. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So that's the chapter title. I love that. So we got to, if it's going to be done, I love this one quote too. If it can be done on Zoom, it should not be done in a room. Love that one. I'm stealing that. That's going to be a mantra for me. Let's see, what else did I have? I had in this the dine around example, so these low cost things that we can do to really enhance an event. And as myself, as a professional speaker, how do I insert myself even more so into the supply chain to be a part of the overall experience, not just for my one keynote, but for offering myself as a podcast person or interviewing the CEO or whatever it might be to bring attendees in for the overall experience. I love that. So thanks for that gift of that one. I wrote that one down as well. Good. So everybody, this was a podcast, and it's a wrap for today's episode, the Amputate to Amplify podcast. I want to thank my guest, Sarah Michelle, for gracing us with her insights of inspiration and taking us on a transformational journey by helping us amputate fear and amplify life. Again, I'm your host, John Register, a professional speaker, guiding us through this transformative journey of some of the most inspiring leaders in the business events world. Remember, it's not just about facing challenges, it's about converting them into your greatest successes. We again thank Inspire Communications International for sponsoring the show. Inspire Communications International, working with business leaders who are ready to hurdle adversity, amputate fear, and embrace a new normal mindset to win the medals in their life by delivering interactive keynote speeches, fireside chats, sales kickoffs, year-end celebrations, and more. We're going to add podcasts to that now, so that's definitely what's coming in. And continue your journey of transformation by following me online at www.johnregister.com or amputate to amplify podcast.com. Find all my social media handles there that will link you to daily doses of inspiration and updates on future episodes. Together, we can amputate the limitations and amplify the competitive advantage and win life's medals along the way. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your besties and mosties, keeping amplifying your life. Until next time, we say Vitam Sperari, which means breathe life, breathe, and go forth to inspire your world. Catch you next time. Bye for now.